Berger, the animal behaviorist, and this is going to be another video about the definition of enrichment, since it is such an important topic and it's also my area of expertise. And today I wanted to go through this really great book, which is called The Environmental Enrichment for Captive Animals by Robert J. Young. And I especially like the fact that it has a parrot on the front. It's probably my favorite book on environmental enrichment. And I know that a lot of people don't have access to texts like these, so I'm just going to read some excerpts from this book today and then talk about what they mean. Please just ignore the booming sounds in the background. There is some sort of testing going on outside that's very, very loud. But I think you should still be able to hear me over that booming sound in the background. There are a couple of different definitions of enrichment in this book, and I'm going to read them to you. So, oh, you can also hear my chickens are free-ranging around here, so if they're clucking in the background. So, the definitions of environmental enrichment. Environmental enrichment is a concept which describes how the environments of captive animals can be changed for the benefit of the inhabitants. Behavioral opportunities that may arise or increase as a result of environmental enrichment can be appropriately described as behavioral enrichment. And that definition is by Shepherdson, and that was written in 1994. So let me break down that first definition a little bit. So the first sentence is, environmental enrichment is a concept which describes how the environments of captive animals can be changed for the benefit of the inhabitants. So how can we change the environment in which an animal is kept so that we can benefit the animal? And then it talks about behavioral opportunities that can arise from enrichment. So that's what I got into in my last video about enrichment, where I said that a really practical way to define enrichment is to choose a behavior that you want to promote. So in this definition, it's saying behavioral opportunities that may arise or increase are called behavioral enrichment. So that's talking about those behaviors like climbing that may result from adding an additional perch. So we're really thinking about what is the environment that surrounds an animal. And if this animal is your pet, this environment might be inside of your house. And if the animal is being kept in a cage, we would start there in that immediate environment, but then if the animal also spends time outside of the cage, you could expand that so that the definition includes the rest of your home. And it can even include the outside world if you are taking your pet out for walks on a leash, or if you have one of those nice strollers or a travel cage for your parrot to go out for outings. But the environment is just whatever is immediately surrounding the animal. And that is the cage, the room, and that includes everything inside the cage or inside the room or inside the surroundings. So it can be, sounds that your animal is hearing, smells, scents that they are smelling, different textures that they are feeling, different things that they interact with. And the second definition, which I really like, is environmental enrichment is a process for improving or enhancing zoo animal environments and care within the context of their inhabitants' behavioral biology and natural history. It is a dynamic process in which changes to structures and husbandry practices are made with the goal of increasing behavioral choices to animals and drawing out their species-appropriate behaviors and abilities, thus enhancing animal welfare. And that was a definition that was presented at a zoo husbandry conference in 1999. And the definition was provided by Valerie Hare to the author of this book. And I'll go through that one again. So environmental enrichment is a process for improving or enhancing zoo animal environments. So first off, because this is from a zoo husbandry conference, it's emphasizing zoo animals, but it can definitely apply to pet animals as well. But a lot of environmental enrichment studies and work has been done in zoos. And I am now taking that knowledge and applying it to your pets and your homes. Because, you know, as important as it is for zoo animals to have good welfare and interesting things to do inside their zoo enclosures, it's also extremely important for pet animals to have, you know, enrichment in your home. And unfortunately, this is a fairly new discussion within the companion animal world. So this discussion of environmental enrichment has been going on longer in the zoo world than it has in the pet trade. And it's time that we really do start having discussions about enrichment in for captive animals that are living inside our homes as our pets or as our companions or family members. Then it goes on to say that it's a process of improving or enhancing environments and care within the context of their inhabitants' behavioral biology and natural history. So that means that we can change the way that we care for animals so that we are caring for them in a way that's really appropriate for their particular species background and their, you know, taking into account how they would behave and where they would live in the wild. So this is super important for exotic pets, and I use parrots as an example frequently, you know, because I have the experience of studying parrots, and it's extremely important that we do try to provide a naturalistic environment for parrots, or at least allow them to perform the behaviors that they would perform in a wild environment, and that's very different than the home environment tends to be. So we can update and modernize our care with any new research that comes out about the species that we're keeping. And there's some species that will have more research than others, and that can be a challenge as well. But we do want to draw on the natural history or the behavioral biology, whatever the animals would do in their normal habitat, and read up on the type of plants that they would eat or climb, or where they would bathe in the wild, where they would drink in the wild, what sort of noises they'd be exposed to, how they would live and interact with other animals. All these things can be taken into account when we're coming up with ways to enrich the lives of our pets, especially our exotic pets. And then it goes on to say that enrichment is a dynamic process. So it's a changing and active process in which changes to structures and husbandry practices. So structures would be maybe changes to the cage itself, changes to your room. If you have a bird room, adding a play stand would be an example of one of those changes. Adding additional perches in the cage, adding new toys, those are all examples of changes to structure. And then changes to husbandry practices would include changing the diet that you're providing so that your bird has more nutritious food, maybe changing the way that you present that food so that your bird gets to spend more time searching for finding food, so maybe putting it in different bowls or dishes around the cage, so that promotes a lot of climbing instead of just putting it all in one bowl. Or taking pellets and hiding them in different spots. That would be a change to husbandry. And the goal of those changes is to increase the behavioral choices that are available to the animals. So choice is a really important thing in animal welfare. Animals will be happier and have better welfare or better quality of life if they have more choices. And they don't have to use all of these things that you provide. So you may have an amazing setup that's lots of great enrichment, where a bird could climb or swing or fly or dig or like bathe in a puddle type dish, but your bird may not choose to do all of those things, at least not all at once, but the choices are available to them. And when we're talking about choices and behavioral choices, I often talk about the example of having hiding spaces for your birds in case they want privacy. And I've even made a hashtag on Twitter, so you can follow me at Joanna Berger MSC on Twitter. And there's a hashtag parrot privacy, and I'll share examples of ways that people have created privacy screens or little hiding huts or hiding spots that are safe, where their birds can go to be out of direct sight if they want some alone time. And that having the option of having a hiding space improves their welfare, because then they have more choices of where they want to be. And if we provide a hiding spot or a privacy screen, the bird may choose not to be in that private, out-of-sight area. The bird may definitely choose to stay where they can see more things and be more interactive with the humans or with other animals, and that's totally fine. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just great to provide them with options so that they have chances to behave in different ways and to and I also, under the parrot privacy hashtag, I share a lot of pictures of parrots in their wild natural habitats. So that goes back to the behavioral biology and natural history part of this definition. Pictures of parrots in the wild tend to show parrots in trees that are very leafy, and often the parrots are blending into the leaves and can barely be seen in the photograph. There's also some naturalistic aviaries that do a really good job of recreating this, and they have leafy plants growing, so there can be birds that are in the aviary, but you can barely see them because they have chosen to hide behind the leaves. And that's totally fine. They could also choose to be in a different spot that's more visible to people if they want to. So giving them the choices improves their well-being. And then we talk in this definition about drawing out species-appropriate behaviors and abilities. And that's what I talked about in that last video, promoting natural behaviors through enrichment. So that's in both of these definitions, emphasizing that we are drawing out natural behaviors. So if your animal is not performing any, like if you provide something to the animal, but that doesn't result in the animal performing a natural behavior, we can question whether that's how effective that is as an enrichment item. So this book does go on to break these down. And it says that it gives a list of goals of enrichment. So the goals are to increase behavioral diversity, and that means increasing the range of different things that your animal does. So, an animal might do many different things throughout the day in the wild. And I talked about that a little bit in my time budgets video, like what some of those things might be. But increasing behavioral diversity means increasing the things that your animal is doing, the activities that they're engaging in throughout each day. So when I go into a home with a depressed parrot who's been rescued from an abusive or a neglect situation, The parrot may be used to just standing still for the majority of the day, but then we provide effective enrichment, and that brings out the natural behaviors. So this bird, instead of just standing still, starts to climb, stretch the wings, vocalize, and search for food, starts chewing, starts digging if we provide a digging tray, starts bathing because we're providing a bathing dish and maybe also a spray bottle for misting, like rain coming down, and all these new activities start to be done by this bird instead of just standing still. And then another goal that's very important is to reduce the frequency of abnormal behavior. So effective enrichment reduces abnormal behaviors like feather picking or other repetitive behaviors like self-harming, self-mutilation. All of those are really bad for bird health, very dangerous, so we want to decrease those obsessive compulsive behaviors. We also would want to decrease pacing or repetitive circling or any other abnormal repetitive behavior, which could be licking the tongue up and down over and over and over. It could be screaming the exact same scream over and over and over, very repetitively. Could also be swaying back and forth over and over. And these are things that animal welfare the public who has an interest in the well-being of zoo animals might notice at a low welfare zoo. And so you can look on animal rights pages and see different posts of people being concerned about bears pacing in a small enclosure, but there's all different types. It's not just pacing. So when an animal is bored and frustrated, they might do repetitive abnormal behaviors, and we will reduce those by providing effective enrichment. Then we also want to increase the range or number of normal or wild behavior patterns. We also want to increase positive use of the environment, utilizing all of the space and the ability to cope with challenges in a normal way. So that's a little bit about enrichment. I'm going to